in the celebrating bolognese almost to her knees without cosmetics or jewels, smelling aseptically of soap, and her face to Michelangelo, more beautiful, her whole body.
So, ecstatic poet, what does that mean?
Well, it sort of comes through you, that it's not of you, it's channeled writing, I guess some people might call it. That's my definition of it. I've written quite a lot that is not, it's not me writing, or I feel like it's not me. There's a poem that I could share that comes to mind.
Yeah.
So that's, I'll tell a brief bit about my background.
Yeah.
During the explanation, but I had brain surgery that I wasn't supposed to live through or come out of with my wits about me. And a 30-year-old neurosurgeon told me if I lived, the possibility existed I could become a clearer, sharper person, around clearer, sharper. And I started doing all this writing. And 2 months I wrote, I wrote every day. I still write every day. It's 31 years ago. But I had a very clear thought to extract lines from the writing, and I put together a piece that's published and available on the homepage of my website, Earth, Ocean, Heavens. But the comment that I was going to make was 9 months after the surgery, I had been handwriting everything, and I asked my neighbors and family if anybody had a laptop or a word processor that I could borrow, and started entering some into a computer. A neighbor of mine said, "Oh, my sister and I have a laptop. She's got it. I don't think she ever uses it." The next day it was in my apartment. My daughter Isis was 9 at the time. She had already had a couple of years of computer in school and started writing her autobiography, ADO biography. And she opened a Word document for me titled Earth, Ocean, Heavens, which is the name that came to me when I was sailing in my 20s. Somewhere out on the open ocean, 1,000 miles, came to me like a lightning bolt, Earth, Ocean, Heavens, with a thought that I'd publish a book someday by that name, which I have, and it's a free book on the homepage of my website by that name. The laptop all of a sudden was in our apartment. Isis started writing. She opened a Word document for me. We had company for dinner. I closed the laptop down. I woke up in the middle of the night with a very short poem in my mind. The night of day tells me I'm feeling more than words can say, stars reflecting cosmic wonder. Something like that. And the minute the page came up and I opened the laptop and it said Earth, Ocean, Heavens at the top, this poem was just dictated to me line by line. And it's only 9 lines. It's somewhat spiritual. All the beings of all the worlds are watching now, so desirous of our upliftment, praying to mankind to hear the calls. They've been in a steady stream, beaming to our heart's desires, caressing what we say we want. We could see the end continuum as clearly as they do, rising in the bluest skies, fully in our heart for love, being one with God. So that, it's just, I was pretty excited about it. And it wasn't, I didn't feel like I wrote it. There's another poem that I wrote that happened the same way. It's answering your question about ecstatic poetry. I was part of the Salt Winds Poets here. Some people might know about them. I was part of a writing group at the Wellfleet Library, and someone invited me to one of the Salt Winds Poets meetings, and I sort of tease and say I felt like I died and went to heaven. I revered them. I used to go to readings, and they were just an amazing group of poets. And so I went to a meeting at J. Dean's house, sort of like an English-style house in Harwich, with 8 or 9 people. And, boy, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying?
The Salt Winds.
Oh, the Salt Winds.
That's a cool name.
Oh, yeah, Salt Winds Poets. Oh, so then one of the Salt Winds Poets lived in Sarasota, and she said, when you come to Sarasota, you can be part of my poetry group. And that was the Gulf Gate Poets at a library. So we meet twice a month, And we'd meet for 3 hours, and there were probably about 7 of us, and we'd get a topic to write about, and during the meeting, everyone would share their poem. I mean, they'd share their poem, someone else would read it, and then the person whose poet was had to just be silent, and the room would critique it. So all these new poems were written. You know, some of the poems that I'll share perhaps during this were results of the, different assignments that we had. So the gentleman that led the group said, "You used to live on a sailboat. You should write a poem about the bow of the boat." And I didn't write a poem for the longest time. And then one day it just, and the same thing happened. This poem just wrote itself, and it's very simply stated, same thing, several lines, titled Destination Peace on Earth. There could be someone on the bow of our boat. Our boat is our planet Earth, the landfall that's being pursued, peace. Planet Earth appears to be going through hell, war, destruction, poverty, starvation. I've added terrorist attacks and the pandemic. Only begin the list of horror. Is it time to enter the next 1,000-year cycle, an age foretold with peace and light and beauty? Yes. So it's...
That's great.
Well, it's just another poem that was part of that group that just came to mind. I mean, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It was titled The Key, and it was in April 2003. And I wrote, if someone had the key to peace on earth and calmer weather patterns, would you listen? Would you heed what they shared with you? It's springtime. I'd like to plant 100 seeds in minds that bask in brilliance.
Great. Wonderful.
Is that good? Do you want me
That's
to share
good.
more of those poems, or
Yeah, I think that's a good theme to have right now.
because they share about the peace on earth?
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of those poems were to use the word beginnings, and I wrote, beginnings from creation breathe peace and joy and balance. They are what reality is made of. Humanity chooses. Breathing, how conscious we are of our breath in each moment as it enters and exits our body, determines our experience. Letting go of thinking, gently, with very little effort, is an essential component. We, as a collected race of people, could enter what's called heaven. Here, now, we simply need to choose it. And then there's a poem titled Heaven. Heaven is a breath away. It's this close. Look, I'm breathing. Consciousness can be multiplied by mankind watching breathing. What a concept. An even larger concept. Breathe in through the crown, which is the top of the head, out through the navel. Hence, heaven. Could it be that simple? So that's a few of those.
That's great. That sounds like the meditation that you had learned, right?
Well,
Some
I was
ways.
actually taught to meditate and chant on a mountaintop in Haiti when I was sailing. I mean, that's another story altogether, but it impacted my life in such a profound way. I found out I could buy vegetables for half of what they cost in Port-au-Prince if I went up to a mountain market. Datsun pickups with several people and chickens and ducks in baskets halfway up the mountain, and we transfer in a village called Pétionville, and then Peugeot station wagons with several people and chickens and ducks in baskets. And sometimes we'd drive through the clouds, and we'd come out the other side, and these women were walking so straight with these huge baskets on top of their head, just, and it was a market, and I could buy vegetables for half what they cost in Port-au-Prince, and if I went up to that mountain market, and when I met an American couple, introduced them to the captain, they'd come down to the boat, have dinner, spend the night. We'd go up to the mountains, have dinner, and spend the night. And Steve one day said, I could teach you and Joseph to meditate and chant. And I didn't know if Joe would go along with it or not, but I told him, and he respected Steve so much, he said, okay. And he taught us meditation with a mantra, and I had a very profound, a 20-minute meditation. I saw the heavens inside my mind. I mean, it was so profoundly real. That happened to me after my brain surgery also. Just a visual of that, walking around Boulder or working in a deli right after my surgery, and sometimes there was this 50-50 visual of seeing heaven as it's described in this book called the Urantia book. So, so meditation, and the chant was Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, which I didn't know for 20 years is a Buddhist chant. And you repeat positive thought prayers. And this is an interesting story to tell, but it's about the chanting, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It took us days to leave Haiti. And we finally, we'd made such good friends. We were there for 3 months, and just, the people had absolutely nothing, but I'd say bonjour, and they'd say, oh, bonjour, madame, comment allez? I took the public transportation to the end and would find out when they were coming back, and no matter where I went, that was the response, was, oh, bonjour, madame. With people with absolutely nothing, comment allez, bright eyes. So, so the chanting, it took us days to leave, and we left, we anchored 2 nights off the north coast of the southern peninsula. It's a long southern peninsula. And then we were going to cross the Caribbean to Panama. And the second morning we woke up and there was absolutely no wind. And Joe, we never used to power anywhere. We actually sailed offshore from Miami up here one spring, and we were becalmed in the Gulf Stream for 3 days. It was like being in a fishbowl, really eerie. He didn't start the engine. We just sat becalmed for 3 days. And it was really eerie. So there was no wind. And because we had the intention of crossing the Caribbean to Panama, he started the engine and it clanged and banged and spit oil out the back and died. And he was beside himself. And he wanted to go back to Port-au-Prince to get the engine fixed. And I said, Steve taught it, and this was before I knew that it was a Buddhist chant. I said, Steve taught us to chant, why don't we chant for the wind? And we started chanting, and the rigging started moving, and he opened his eyes and he said, oh, it's from a wrong direction. And it died. I told it at one of these meetings at a later time, and somebody said, see, you need to be specific. So I said, we weren't chanting for the wind from a certain direction, Joseph. We were just chanting for the wind. And we finished the chant, and the wind came up, and we sailed 5 days to Panama, downwind sailing with sparkles on the water, and I caught fish all the time. We had a cat on board the boat named Sly Fox, and it was just really a sweet experience. And my first 2 poems were to that gentleman that I sailed with off the northern coast of Panama. I wrote, Joseph, the peace and calm I feel in my heart stem from the love we know. You have been, you are, you always will be, a mate to my soul. And then we left from here. From Martha's Vineyard, we spent the fall taking all our friends sailing. We sailed up here, and we're here for the summer. And then when we were leaving Provincetown, I wrote, August over, autumn comes. I look forward to sailing with you. Joseph, I love you more each day. Really short poems, and then more writing came through later in my life.
Did you practice writing regularly and then?
I wasn't. Well, it was just more, when I was here in the 90s, I took a course from a woman that wrote an article about me for the Cape Codder, actually, but she taught a course in the artist way, and one of the suggestions in the book is that you write morning pages, and I had already been doing that. But it's to help you clear the blocks in your mind, so that it's like free, you write and it's more of a free flow. And so sometimes, but the writing I never think about it. I write every morning, and it's all positive, and it's all about how peace can be achieved and the weather patterns can be calmed. Something that was a very profound experience in my life was in 2001. I was doing home health care with 2 ladies next door to each other here in Provincetown at Mashop. And one called the one that I was with and said a plane just hit the World Trade Center building. We turned the TV on. I saw that other plane explode. And then during September, I had a 1-month exhibit up at the Cape Cod 5 Bank in Orleans. And I had all these museum frames. I ended up buying all the Turner Museum frames when my former husband and I divorced. A friend of mine and I disassembled all the art, and I bought the frames. So the morning after September 11th, I pulled out a 30 by 40 frame and extracted 2 lines that were in the exhibit already in a smaller piece of art. And one was a line that I opened. Dennis Rhodes, who had the Poets Corner on WMR, I actually was, I think I was the most frequent guest. Every time, we had such an ease of talking, every time I'd run into him, he'd invite me to be on the show again. But he created these poetry festivals. The poetry festivals I was in, and it was they were in Whalers Wharf right after the fire. He had use of the building, and there was I think it was the owner's apartment upstairs that wasn't even finished yet, but there was a writing group in that apartment looking out on the bay. And he said, write about something you have an interest in, and then he inserted phrases that were like U-bends in the writing. The first thing he said was, sponges erase the light of the heavens. So I opened the exercise with a long, complex question simply stated, and it's one of the lines that I extracted the morning after September 11th. Has the time arrived when humanity is able to digest the remarkable reality of just how simple it could be to shift the Earth's vibration? And then the other thought that I extracted was part of a small piece of art in the exhibit. 30 years ago, I learned about the French philosopher Teilhard de Chardin, who created the word noosphere to describe a layer of thought that hovers above nature and acts as a universal consciousness. It's what people think of as the one mind or the collective consciousness. Chardin actually felt that our thoughts go up to an energy field and they're reflected back. And that was when I came up with this philosophy, and it's what my writing is about, and the whole big picture is that if enough people on the planet could intentionally quiet their thinking minds just for a few minutes daily, it would quiet that atmosphere around the planet. And if that's what gets reflected back to us, I believe it's a path to peace and widespread healing. It could happen in a heartbeat, just to, all of a sudden enough people quieting their minds that it would shift the consciousness, raise the consciousness, raise the consciousness on the planet. So a line that I had 2 websites for the longest time. A young man in Sarasota, when I moved to Sarasota, I worked in a rehab hospital, and he saved a page when I was part of Dee Morehouse's gallery that was she had for her husband Alan Morehouse was one of the beachcombers, and we were at a party together, and just at a dinner party at someone's house in Wellfleet, and people were talking about my exhibits, and when we all got up from the table, she said, I have a website gallery and I would love to have you be a part of it. So I was for a few years, and then moved to Sarasota, and I became friends with someone who was a tech person who worked in the kitchen. A young guy that we became friends and talked all the time. And when Dee said that she was closing the website, John said, I could save your page for you, and I asked Dee permission, and over a year it became my first website, lindaohlsongraham.com. And then gentleman that made a CD of my poetry in Sarasota created a second website, Earth, Ocean, Heavens. And then 2 years ago, September of 2022 was an amazing month for me. I'll continue with my niece called me 2 years ago and said, I was looking at your websites and they seem, 2 28-page websites. I could merge both of them and make one site that might be more concise. And she created my website that I have now and put photos together with some of my poetry, and pretty much everything that was on the first 2 sites is, she just merged them. So that happened, but also during September 2022, Michael Anthony Ingram, who has a radio show on Blog Talk Radio, Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio. He's a retired Black professor, and he's the founder of the Washington Poetry Project, called me. Oh my gosh. So what prompted that was 4 or 5 years ago, a woman in Washington State was starting a Sunday afternoon Zoom room called Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry Online Radio. And his Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. It's just that, Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. And I was in 20 people in a Zoom room. I mean, I was in the background of a lot of them, but I was featured 4 or 5 times on that show. I mean, she read about me and contacted me. God bless her. Yeah. And then I was featured, and Michael heard one of those shows and called me and said, "Would you be my hour guest?" And I was, and that audio is actually clickable on the homepage of my website, Earth Ocean. Right on the top of the page, someone can hear that radio show. So Alatishi Kolawale in Nigeria, who's won international awards and written a few books, had been Michael's guest a couple of months before, called me on the phone the next day. I mean, this is 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. We talked yesterday for a half hour. I mean, we started FaceTiming every day. He said he was about to publish a book. And I said, if you send it to me, I could take a look at it to see if it needs any editing. So I copied it to a Word document. It was just punctuation and spelling, nothing to do with his writing. But, it was just cleaned up a little bit. And when I did that, he said, send me a little of your poetry and a bio. And a week later, I had a first draft of the book that's now in 4 stores in Provincetown, Women Crafts, East End Books, the Art Association, and Provincetown Bookshop, and it's titled Save the Earth. He put my poetry and my bio in the front of the book, and then 60 pages of his poems. And then he published it on Amazon, so it's been on Amazon for, since it was published, and it's been a year or so that the book's been in the stores around town.
Cool.
Yeah, Save the Earth. So that's Alatishi. So we FaceTime all the time. And he was just on Michael's show again. So somebody might be able to hear that if they went to, it's QLPOR.org, I believe. Michael Anthony Ingram. So.
Great. What else is happening new? What's new with you?
Well, I just feel happy that I just came back from being in Sweden, which was really wonderful. I visited my daughter, and I'm a traveler from way back, and it's my 3rd trip to Sweden, and I just feel she had a surgery that I wanted to be there to help her out, so I actually went for 5 weeks. That was new, and I moved, and so I'm in a wonderful apartment here in town, and feel very lucky about that. We really have shared a lot.
Yeah. Did you get to spend time with your granddaughter, right? Or Grandson.
Mio, yeah, major amounts of time with him.
Oh, good.
Yeah, Did
you learn anything from Mio?
Well, I can still hear him say, okay. Just his tone of voice, he say something, he's okay. he just gets it, and he just... we went to see some museums while I was there. I went to the Nobel Prize Museum and brought a copy of the book of Alatishi's and my book, and I'm keeping in touch with them. And I went to the Nordica Museum, which is like a cathedral, but it has 4 stories of rooms around the cathedral, and the 4th floor tells Swedish history in centuries. So it's, a space about the size of this room, 30 or 40 feet, and with different presentations, with stuff, like people, so it's like an actual scene or different things that were going on, or sometimes a video of someone and what they were going through with feeding their family or dealing with the elements, in Sweden in 1500 or so. It was really fascinating.
Cool.
And then we went to a place outside the city that had a Van Gogh immersive exhibit, which was wonderful. It took a while to get there by bus, and then we took a boat ride back through the archipelago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the Van Gogh exhibit was remarkable. I just love to travel, and it did my heart a world of good to be able to be with my daughter.
Good.
Yeah. So just, life keeps one busy. Just
Yeah.
when we get engaged, it keeps us moving along.
That's a good point. There was one thing in the book that stood out for you, and I really liked this one line that it had to do with, I'm not going to get the wording exactly right, but destruction following creation. And you seem to pause on that in the Agony and Ecstasy book.
Yeah.
I wondered what you thought about that. And
Well, a line with those lines. Oh, thanks. That's actually, so relevant to what's going on today. So in the 80, I extracted 80 lines after my surgery. I don't know if you want to hear them. Do you want me to share them or just a couple?
sure,
You want to hear them?
if you
I
have
know
all
them
of
by
them? Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Well, I
Okay.
without even looking at the book, I can share
Okay.
a lot of them.
Okay. Sure.
Because
Which
they're
ones
pretty.
you want?
Well, they're pretty fascinating. This was ecstatic writing,
Mm-hmm.
stream of consciousness writing. I mean, every morning I still write like that, and the writing comes through so positive, and it just comforts me, because it just tells me to be patient, and that it's been 21 years since I wrote that formula for world peace, and I haven't gone back at all. It's just the pace of the forward motion has been given me, really taught me a lot of patience.
Yeah, and maybe even going backwards
Well,
sometimes,
it's
right?
just wild. Yeah. So what was I?
You were going to tell me just some of your
Oh, some of the
lines that
writing.
you
Oh, here we go.
to.
I'll just share this. So, yeah. So I was doing a couple of hours writing daily, and I had a very clear thought to extract lines from the writing, and put this piece together. And they're not connected with each other. Each line's in. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 thoughts together within one piece, sort of. And they're not in the sequence that I wrote them in, they're in the sequence that I extracted them in. Visualize being on a spaceship, walking into infinity. Energetic truth is the deep truth within us. Let go of all things that want to die. Have an appetite for the death dance of the blood. Dark night of the soul is a place of transformation. Silence is a way to move towards essence. Love is not something that we do. It's like the breath. Peace will come, and with it many reflections of the light. To be deep is ultimate surrender. Live in the confluency of life. The whole of heaven can be contained in each one of us, in every act we do. The sweetness of the kingdom of heaven visits each one of us. The function of a human being is to take things that are intrinsically beautiful and turn them into heaven. Immortality is that we become a memory in the thought of God. When one becomes closer to being a mystic, one leaves meaning behind and lives more in the moment. A mystic lives in the interiority of life. Worship illuminates destiny. We're all facets of the diamond which is God, each of us reflecting light in our own way. Swim and dance in the beauty of life. Every time a cell becomes more awakened within us, God becomes fuller. Crisis can bring about an evolutionary leap. That's the line that really stands out. And what you were asking about we're really going through quite an experience as a race of people with what's going on the planet. It's just so many people. There's such a large percentage of the planet that's so challenged. And, the concept of the writing is that in a moment or two of silence, the line that closed one of my websites, I don't think I said this earlier because I shared about the websites, but the line that closed my Linda Ohlson Graham site is, please hold the thought with me that peace on earth and calmer weather patterns can easily happen in a moment or two of silence in enough of the collective mind. And then some of the other lines from the writing, there are laws of manifestation. We, in fact, are co-creators and can more fully actualize our experience. As we diverge from our center, we're heading towards hell. The place where we live in the fullness of life is the place where we want to share everything in. The first step in making a change is being conscious. And then there's a little poem with my former husband's and my daughter's name in it. Reflections of Douglas and Isis, loving, flowing, growing with me, the energy that is within. Forms, soft impressions. Gentleness is their place for me, heartfelt love and laughter, complete with love and laughter, growing in harmony, blessing me, blessing. And then a line that I'll close these lines. There's some about the weather too that I'll share, but one of them, I have to stop admiring my life from a distance. And then a couple about the weather. Nature is an open book to enlightenment. Our process is to learn and read it. Ugly only makes us realize seeds for growth and change are planted in the future. As mankind calms as quote-unquote nature, Mother will be pleased. So they would just, I just cherish them. I feel so blessed that I could have been the vehicle for that, to have. So this is something that's kind of fun to, just to share about the surgery. And you don't know how you're going to come out of it. When I opened my eyes, I had been a member of the Junior Symphony Guild in Denver. It's an organization of 200 or 300 women that they're multi-millionaire, billionaire wives who raise money for symphonic and classical music. And because I co-directed the Turner Museum, they asked me if I would jury a art show in a front tennis court in one of the show homes. They'd get somebody's huge house in the suburbs. It would be emptied out completely. People would buy a before and after ticket and see it totally empty. And then designers and decorators would come in and put their name on everything. So people would come in and get ideas about how to furnish their houses. So the Junior Symphony Guild, it's an organization of wives of multi-millionaire, billionaire men who raise money for symphonic and classical music in Denver. And because I co-directed the Turner Museum, someone that I knew that was an artist she was part of a spiritual study group that Douglas and I were part of, and she was also a member of the guild. And so she told the guild, from finding out that I had surgery through spiritual friends, Shoshone found out. And when I opened this all happened within a day because they wanted to do the surgery immediately, and he didn't tell me not to eat before you're anesthetized, and I went up to admissions and had to wait a couple of hours, and I had driven through rush hour traffic, and the cafeteria at Denver General's and McDonald's attached to the building, and I went out and had 2 breakfast burritos and some hash browns, and when I got up, the anesthesiologist, the first question she asked me was, when was the last time you ate? And I said, oh my gosh, I've just eaten. And she called the neurosurgeon, and they debated in front of me the life-threateningness of pumping my stomach and the possibility of food getting lodged or waiting to operate. And the neurosurgeon decided to wait to operate. So I just thought, well, that's so that people can find out and pray for me. So 2 really dear friends were there the day of the surgery, and 8 months later I had lunch with one of my friends, one of the friends that was there. And she said, you were so cute the day of your brain surgery. I said, what are you talking about? She said, you were so drugged. You were being so ridiculously silly. We were almost rolling on the ground, laughing hysterically. And then they said, okay, we're ready. So, what better way to go into brain surgery than... No kidding. And then I opened my eyes after being anesthetized, and there was a card right in my path that said, we wish you well, the Junior Symphony Guild. And I felt the light go through me, literally, brighter, And then, because this is backtracking a little bit, but a few years before, we put ads in the Denver paper that we'd rent the space for people to have board meetings or classes, or, we started a classical concert series in the house, but people would rent the space. And I answered the phone, and this woman from San Francisco called to see if she could rent the space. And it turned out that she came twice over 5 years' time, and she was an internationally traveled nationally known psychic healer and did programs in the living room, readings for people in upstairs den. I arranged for her to do programs at the Grand Junction Church in, we drove, Douglas and she and I drove across the mountains, and she did some programs in Grand Junction. Well, so I opened my eyes and the note was there from the Junior Symphony Guild, and Sally arrived on the day of my brain surgery and did Kabbalah toning at the hospital, where every letter of the alphabet has a different healing qualities. We say A, as loud and as long, as full as you can. And the doctors and nurses just figured whatever they figured, it couldn't hurt me. Oh, these are fun stories to tell. Thank you so much. It was really, I called it minor brain surgery within the month. So, and that's what I'm revealing here is so that happened. Sally arrived. My brother was a nationally known portrait photographer, President Ford's personal photographer, the official photographer for 2 of the inaugurations. He had sold all his studios. That's why I went to Denver. I went out there for 2 weeks, and he offered me life on a platter, or gave me a red Oldsmobile convertible to drive. I could charge gas, a job making more money than I ever made. So I worked for him for a dozen years. I stayed in Denver and worked for him. And he sold everything, let go of all his staff, had a 2-room cabin on a river west of Vail, invited me up to his cabin for rest and relaxation. I couldn't go back with my former husband. He and I had separated a month before after 9 years of marriage, and I was staying with a friend who was a dear friend, but not somebody I could say, will you take care of me? So I took my brother up on his offer. He told the neurosurgeon he was going to put me to work. He always had sports cars, like XKEs and Corvettes, and he bought a couple of $100 worth of food, and we went up to his cabin. And over the weekend, he told me he got a contract to do a photo directory for Country Club of the Rockies, some of the wealthiest people on the planet that have second homes in Vail and Beaver Creek. And he had to hire someone to do telephoning. And I said, couldn't I do that? He said, well, I could let you try. So with a little Tibetan hat on that covered a 4-inch bald spot and a pretty profound scar, I worked 3 40-hour weeks. He paid me $1,000. He said, his customers for a year afterwards said, where's that nice young lady that worked for you last summer? So, it's like doing push-ups when your arm's out. And then I wanted to get back to Boulder because I thought Isis, my daughter, was going to live with her dad. And I stopped at Idaho Springs, which is an underground hot springs resort. I used to say it's like walking into a Fellini film. It's a very old, unpretentious resort built in the early 1900s that the Indians built with. You go down a flight of stairs and there's tunnels, separate men's and women's, hewn out from the rock with baths that go from 105 to 112 or 13 degrees with steam rising, and you have to be naked. It's really like walking into a Fellini film. So I used to go there on my days off, and Douglas would say to me, you look all ironed out when I come back, because it just... So I knew the massage therapist really well. I worked 3 40-hour weeks for my brother. On my way back to Boulder, I stopped at Idaho Springs, got undressed, put a towel around me, took off my Tibetan hat, walked by the massage room, and a friend said, wow, Linda, what happened? And I said, I had brain surgery. And she said, what shape did they cut in your skull? And when I told her a triangle, she became breathlessly excited for me that I had had such a powerful spiritual... sincerely excited for me, so much so that I had to shrug my hands and say, Fran, really? And all this writing was coming through every hour, every day, a couple of hours. So I soaked in the waters for a couple of hours, and when I arrived back in Boulder, I said I had minor brain surgery. That's how that came about, because I was carried through it. I don't know how to describe it any other way. I was really carried through it. The tornado was an amazing experience to go through. A tornado on a 28-foot sailboat that when I sailed from here with the gentleman my mother encouraged me to travel with, we went down the Inland Waterway and we were in a tornado with us on board the boat, totaled the boat, and he bought an alt-teak ketch the next summer, and we immediately did 1,000 miles of sailing, went on a cruise to Haiti and Panama and Colombia. And then...
What did you do when the tornado came?
Exactly what he told me to do. That's something inside me. No one knows how they're going to respond, really. So there's something inside me, I don't know what it is, and I mean, I don't know if I can depend on it that would always happen, but it's happened 3 times already, so I just, woof, and I did exactly what he told me to do, and the wind turned around 180 degrees and blew us up into a foot of water. The boat just kept lifting up and banging on the bottom. You know, we had immediately put oil gear on, and I had to hold my arm up because the spray felt like bullets. And the boat landed in a foot of water, and when the wind subsided, the Coast Guard came along and they towed another boat off, you know, big come-alongs, like winches on deck and come-alongs, and the boat floated away. And when they tried to tow our boat, it was discovered it landed on a big stump. And the captain just sold it as it was, and, you know, I mean, other things happened. We both went our separate directions, and then he saw this boat. He had seen this boat for sale the summer before in Sail magazine, and the gentleman only owned it for a year and came up for sale again, and that's the boat I did all that sailing on. So Joseph. So I think I shared the 2 poems about him, The Peace and Calm, and then August Over, Autumn Comes, and then, so this is another line that came through that when I came back here, I mean, some people may know this happened. Someone asked me if I was living in Wellfleet, and somebody said, have you ever thought of doing any boat work again? Because I used to do all the bright work on the boat. Oh my gosh, I do boat. I was a good friend of Flyers because we hauled the boat out at Flyers Boatyard. I mean, here we are in the library, right, in the bowsprit room, and you know, we hauled the boat out at Flyers Boatyard, and because it was so immaculate, he and I became really good friends. I just cherished his friendship. And so somebody said, have you ever thought of doing any boat work again? And I was living in Wellfleet, driving in, rowing out to this boat in the harbor. My rodeo didn't pass inspection. It had big holes in the frame. And my mother taught me when you lose something that means a lot to you, it just makes the space for something even greater to come in and take its place. So rather than being devastated, I thought, I wonder what's going to happen. I had taken a 5,000-mile road trip by myself before I moved back here, from Boulder to Albuquerque in the deep south and Sarasota and back up, you know, through the country. So, and I biked for 3 weeks from Wellfleet, Brown Brook Island Road, and in on 6A. I lost 15 pounds. And when I was out on the boat, I saw a couple rowing in. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're doing what I did in my 20s. I didn't think about sailing with them. I just thought, look at them. And then I ran into them in front of the post office, and we talked for an hour. And Jim was a boat builder. They were from Ontario. Michelle had a natural foods cafe. He fell in love with her for cooking. I said I'd love to sail again, and they said, well, we take people sailing with us. We'd love to have you join us. I mean, I was just ecstatic. And he gave me a business card with 2 email addresses on it and said, we're leaving in a day or 2. We'd love to have you join us. We parted company. 5 minutes later, I thought, oh my gosh, I have to store all my things. I don't know if I can reach them by email before they leave. And an hour later, I walked into the back door of this library, and they were right behind me. And I sailed 3 months to the Bahamas with them, and then stayed in the Abacos for 3 months. It was just the adventure my life needed. Oh, so I had the forward cabin. They had a huge aft cabin with a chart table in it. Oh. And I mean, I had just been on the boat a day, not even a day, and Michelle was in the main cabin. And I said, oh my gosh, do you want to hear this line I just wrote? And she said, well, sure. And I wrote, the qualitative mindfulness we collectively, as a race of people, are able to experience could in fact propel us into an age of light and beauty.
Great.
So it's just fun when those lines come through. I mean, the crisis can bring about an evolutionary leap was a good one. Yeah. There's so many of them that are precious, and I feel so honored and so blessed for amazing experiences that have happened with Dee Morehouse inviting me to be part of her website gallery, and then having my first website come out of it, and being able to put this book together with the help of library people. Back in 2010, Rebecca Levin actually was working here as a tech help person, and she helped me do this. And then, it was put together and it was on a disc. And then the disc was lost for 10 years. And when I moved back and moved into my little place that I moved into here, the disc fell out of a box. And then the other book, the Save the Earth book, came together pretty easily. So, it's just such a joy, actually.
Do you feel like a lot of these lines come through you, and then do you feel a responsibility to share them, get them out there?
Well, that's a good question. My goodness, Nate. So I can share something else that was part of my experience right after I first started doing this writing, after my surgery. I learned, a quote about commitment. It was attributed to Goethe when I came across it. And then years later, a minister shared it in a church and attributed it to the Himalayan explorer, W.H. Murray. Oh, thank you so much. I love sharing this. So, this is really what's kept me going. So the minister at the Unity Church said that it was W.H. Murray that wrote so I went up to him and I said, Don, it's Goethe's quote. And he said, oh, Linda, a lot of people think that, but Murray actually wrote the paragraph and he ended it with a couplet by Goethe. Concerning all acts of initiative in creation, there's one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one, which never otherwise would have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have guessed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. I might have forgotten a word in there. It's so interesting it felt. But, you get the drift of it.
Yeah.
So I had thousands of dollars worth of debt. 7-hour brain surgery with 5 neurosurgeons and a 9-day hospital stay. I wrote to everybody that Christmas and said, can anybody help me with my debt? It's more than I can handle. Several friends sent 20, a couple of friends sent 50, 100, 200. It made a dent, but I still owed thousands of dollars. So the woman who was my daughter's brownie leader, little like younger Girl Scouts, I used to go along on trips. She and I became really good friends, and I really didn't, I knew some about what she did, but I didn't realize she was co-owner of Carl Systems, which are computer systems and libraries back then. And she and her partner were selling their business, or had sold their business. And she called me on the phone and said, do you still have your debt? And I said, I do, Becky. She said, oh, come to my office. I drove through rush hour traffic, got to Denver. They had a whole floor in an office building in South Denver. She met me at the front desk. Oh, come on in. She made me a cup of coffee. And she took out her checkbook and she said, is this how much you owe? And I said, oh my gosh. And I kind of jumped and I said, no, actually it's more than that. She said, oh, how much is it? And I told her and she wrote a check out for the entire amount. And I wrote to everybody that Christmas, my brain surgery and related debt has been paid. I feel so much lighter now. The world is so much brighter now.
Sweet.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
So, all sorts of things occur to help one which never otherwise would have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have guessed would have come his way. I've had absolutely incredible serendipity, if you call it serendipity, kismet. Just meeting people, running into people, just someone that I want to see is right there in my path, or, but just all sorts of things happen. It humbles me. The writing humbles me. And I'm so happy I can share about it here because it's just, the world's going through a crisis. And the writing talks about a simple path to global peace and widespread healing just by the simple act of enough people quieting their thinking minds for a few minutes daily. It's such an amazing concept. It's my truth, and it's what I keep sharing about.
Yeah. I wonder if we could try this for the end, what that looks like when you quiet your mind, and you could just look at the camera and show people.
Oh my gosh.
Does that sound cool?
Well, I don't think I can cross my legs on the chair, but I would just sit quietly instead of sitting with my hands on my lap. That's what, when I was taught to meditate. Oh, that's really interesting. So, just to quiet one's breath. And every time one hears thoughts within one's mind, to say the word thinking, just to acknowledge the thoughts. And, you can thank them that they're there, but just to acknowledge them, but to go back to either, when one meditates, one can either watch one's breath or repeat a mantra. The universal mantra is Om. So I actually was given a mantra, so I just, so just to really quiet the mind, and during, meditate it was suggested to meditate for 15 or 20 minutes, so do that for 20 minutes daily, and just whenever one realizes one is thinking thoughts, to just go back to, like, letting the thoughts go, see them float away, and just come back to the breath. And this is just really recent, that I met someone who was affiliated with the Center for Coastal Studies, but she taught me about diaphragmic breathing. Have you heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never knew about it. And, if you just, like, breathe deeper into your diaphragm, breathe, like, intentionally, your belly sort of, you can feel your belly swell a little bit, and it's a clearer, it brings, that's what, I've done a lot of healthcare and nursing, worked in a rehab hospital for years, and, bringing oxygen to one's body is what brings healing. So deeper breathing can bring healing, and even, I think, can help one's mind to be clearer. It's a gift to be able to do exercise, and I ride a bike. I don't have a car. I've ridden a bike for 10 years. My doctor said, just keep doing what you're doing, because my numbers are right, and I'm happy about that. Yeah, I love, and in Provincetown, it's having the view of the bay and the natural beauty presence, and seeing people that are, I'm happy it's after Labor Day. It's actually, just makes, I love the town when it's a little more quiet, but summer serves a purpose also. It's fun for everybody to come and let loose, and the winter sources everybody that stays here. It's a lovely time of year here.